There we go.
There you go.
We'll do it all over again. All right. Welcome to 20X Phase 2. We're back again today. We're talking with a bit of a dark horse, a company that did not participate in Phase 1, but a really important aspect of our Phase 2 goals is to prioritize things like trust centers and GRC platforms that are designed to consume and be 20X native so that we can increase agency adoption out of the gate. Aeroplicity has demonstrated that they have met all of the expectations against the authorization data sharing standard for a FedRAMP-compatible trust center. And therefore, we're giving them an opportunity to take a pitch here in Phase 2. Before we get into the pitch or additional background, why don't you guys, Jerome, Jamie, give us a 2-3 minute overview of what Aeroplicity is and why you're so excited about jumping into Cohort 1 in the 20X Phase 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So Aeroplicity, we're an AI native, blockchain-backed, cloud-based operating system built specifically for aerospace and defense. So I mean, we have a background slide here, but we can kind of tie in some of this stuff. But so the team, we have decades of experience in IT leadership, specifically in aero and defense, working with government. One of the things that we saw, obviously coming down the pipeline on like the manufacturer side, was obviously CMMC, right? And we spent years of time, years of dollars, kind of implementing that in a legacy mindset. Oh, hey, FIPS 140-2, hardware, port management across the board, all this manual policy procedure, process. And we're like, my God, right? Like it was 72% of the, DoD supply chain is like small businesses. And we're like, there's no way the mom and pop shop that's building that, one critical component down the street is going to be able to compete and actually, comply in this new space. And we said, all right, so can we spin up, and build a different approach, right? You can call it an enclave because that's kind of how it kind of got framed out, right? But like it's more than that, right? Like an easily accessible, low price SaaS product that just inherently solves all of the CMMC requirements. So honestly, that's what we did. When we spun up, we spun up a traceability app for like CFCs, material certs, things like that for the component side that was blockchain backed. A file sharing system, a training system, NIST compliant logging, and honestly, the platform and the business have evolved so much since then. It's expanded to literally an ERP that you can run from your phone, all the way now into FedRAMP tools that are just on there that cover a lot of things. And actually, there's a little bit more of that in some of the next slides.
That's super cool. We're definitely excited to hear about this. I think it's just really great to have someone that didn't actually participate in Phase 1, but still followed along and did the work and got ready for it and is just ready to go with Phase 2. I think that just shows that we didn't fully grasp the entirety of the ecosystem that's following along with what we're doing in the Phase 1 pilot. So before we hand it over to you to give us a pitch about your approach, so far everybody else that we've spoken with, they were part of Phase 1. So we have an idea about their approach. We knew that how they were going about things. We'd seen their stuff before. So we're really interested to have this completely cold. But Nicole, like, especially given this is a trust center and we haven't talked to these folks at all or seen their package before, what are you looking for today?
I'm really interested in I guess the whole package, how you've built it, watching Phase 1 happen, kind of from the wings, not really participating in Phase 1, and how you've incorporated a lot of the lessons learned watching other cloud service providers go through Phase 1, and what you guys have for Phase 2.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, when we were told from it was a C3PAO about 20X, I think it was probably like a month out-ish from the application, deadlines and stuff. So we went all in. I'll be honest. Like we went 100% in, started moving everything over to that approach, and we were, kind of maintaining this, legacy Rev 5, manual system, which that's why we said we're huge fans because, the manual part of that compared to the automation part, like we're all about bringing that simplicity and, that automation to more users, right? So when we did that, we were probably only like a week, I would say, away from actually wanting or being able to submit. The only thing we were actually missing at the time was a 3PAO letter. So because that was a requirement, we were like, okay, well, we really need moderate. Let's wait, and then we're like, oh man, hopefully, they'll let us play in phase 2. So, I mean, we'll talk at the end about our readiness, and Leslie can confirm. I mean, she's been very deep into our approach and the audit against all the new, requirements since like, the November 17th, 18th drop. So I think we're super far in.
And to speak towards just quickly to speak towards like how did the lessons learned help along the way? I think it was very helpful to see examples of submission packages that were published. I mean, and even very specifically, like props out to Meridian for being very explicitly transparent on how they structured some of their content. We did leverage some of that, especially because like the specifics on how you do things is left open, which we love. But starting from scratch on any of that for any company is daunting. So having those examples to at least pull from is very helpful.
But then what we did is, right, we took that and then against literally, I would say, every single response from the FedRAMP team and hey, we kind of suggest you care about these things and those approaches too. We took all of them. We said, okay, well, how do we simplify that into our approach? So, I mean, we basically tried to take everything that was public, everything that was said, and then kind of build our own all-inclusive, right, approach to that, which we could actually speak to a bit.
That's definitely the power of community, right? Like that's what we're trying really hard to do, maximize that transparency. We think that's one of the reasons why you can have a realistic shot at this, even without actually having gone and met with the PMO and gone through review in phase 1 because of that transparency. So I'm super excited to hear more. You got 20 minutes. Give us your pitch. Tell us how you're going to approach the phase 2 pilot if you're accepted in the cohorts.
Absolutely, let's do it. So we have a bit of a philosophy, a mentality, right? That more restriction doesn't really mean more security, right? We've always heard the more compliant doesn't mean more secure. But I give you a story of this. We've seen in industry, someone got rolled out like a new system for like CUI, and it didn't let them print anymore, but they had a print. So they figured out they could forward it to their Gmail, and literally they forwarded CUI to their Gmail and then printed it. So it's like if you're going to provide a way to work around something, like the users are going to find that way to work around it, right? It's inevitable. So we said, okay, systems that are too rigid, right? Users find ways around. So we always believe like real security, it comes from those really good UX, good well-designed tools. They're pretty, they're functional, right, and they're intelligent. And that's always how we built literally everything on the Aeroplicity platform. And it goes to the applications actually that apply now to FedRAMP. So we've always kind of set this bar, and we use Excel as an example, but like if they'd rather stay and do their workflow in Excel or like some manual process, right, we obviously didn't build it right. It's not good enough yet. So, and again, right, it's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve upon everyone staying in that legacy mindset. Let's take that modern approach. So, we took this philosophy and we said, when we went all in, we're like, okay, let's take that same mentality and let's bring it directly to the 20x approach. And we know, it's a fluid, ongoing, improving thing, right? And we're like, so, I mean, you saw, we posted our public package as soon as we had it for the moderate, so that everyone could see it, like fully transparent. Here's everything that we're doing. So, how do we fit? So, just some of the high level things. So, right now, over 90% of our KSIs are fully automated. I know you originally were setting at 70. We saw you actually update it to 80. I don't know if that was because you talked to us or not, but yes, we are over 90%. And actually with some of the tools that we're launching, it should actually approach a little higher, right? We're thinking like we'll probably settle on like 92 by the end of this. So all of Aeroplicity fully hosted in AWS GovCloud, right? So minimum footprint, minimum security risk. We built, and Jamie's gonna talk to this a little bit, but a fully automated scoring system with AI analysis, right? That takes our, JSON, build, runs it through against literally the full context of all the controls, all of our pass-fail criteria and all those things, and then comes out and says, okay, does this meet the intent, of the requirements, the underlying controls, and all that. And then, 4 and 5. So something we didn't talk about in our last pitch, but so yes, we did build trust centers as a service as part underneath our compliance app now. We've also built and will be launching soon significant change notices as a service that meet the other requirements. So we took that and we said, okay, and we have some screenshots, but we didn't just want, oh, hey, this is a really cool, like, here's a form and then fill out this form and now you have this digitally, right? We wanted to build a workflow that followed directly the FedRAMP requirements and process. And that's exactly what we did with, like, approval, mailers and stuff like that, rejections, reasons why. So, like, there's entire workflows behind all these tools now. So speaking of that, Jamie, if you go over just real quick, and again, there's a lot of words here, but high level, and then you guys can ask questions, after, on the KSI stuff.
Yeah, so at a high level, so we decided to organize our KSIs, objectives, and validation criteria alongside our validation commands as one structure. We called that a command register. This includes ID, description, controls, scope, frequency, goals, commands. Now, the commands I wanted to mention separately, just quickly, those are the data collection mechanisms. We specifically crafted them in a way so that as our infrastructure grew within the bounds of the existing services, that our validator would automatically evaluate those as new objects without continual modification. And then finally on this list is the auditor notes. Now on the next slide, when we received the new AFR section, we want to treat these in a similar manner. So they were added to the command register as associated support JSON. So we put those inside that JSON list implementation details for each requirement recommendation. We also included relevant automated commands that are associated in those command registers. And then, so the validation process itself, we wanted to keep simple for auditing purposes, but keep it versatile enough to maximize automation. So the commands from the command register are then executed to generate JSON output artifacts, and then those artifacts are executed by a script and a validation LLM that understands the respective KSI, the description, the controls, the goals, and then the auditor notes that I mentioned from the other slide. So that's kind of at a high level how all that works. But if you want to go into more detail, we can do that later.
Yeah, and obviously we have this all mapped out, right, on like a template JSON, that actually has full markups and things like that. I actually think it's on our public, it is part of our public repo. So we look at, taking this over, we look at 20x as kind of like the bar, right? Okay, here, these require, yeah, of course, you guys label things like, oh, should and must and may and optionals and all that, but like, we still all looked at all of that across the board. It's like, okay, this is the 20x bar now for moderate. So we took some time, we're like, okay, what are some things that maybe we did that are kind of, above the bar? How are we raising it? So we did, and you guys may have remembered this, but we did build a full infrastructure evaluator that identifies new commands in the infrastructure, or like if AWS came out with new commands, things like that, runs it against our actual services use. So if a new service was used, it would actually say, oh, hey, this new service is now in play, right, in your boundary. You're not actually running commands against this KSI, and it's applicable. So it actually pre-identifies stuff so that there's not that manual, oh, hey, we have to go through all these and check them, even though there is some of that too. And that runs against all the KSIs. One of the other cool things is the potential adverse impact. So we built an entire automation for this. So like Security Hub, for instance, flags things like CVSS and stuff like that, not the N1 through N5. So we built an automation that literally takes into account our entire infrastructure, the vulnerabilities roll against that infrastructure, runs it through AI analysis, and then will tag those vulnerabilities with the potential adverse impact criteria, with reasoning and all of that. So instead of a manual checks and balances thing, right, we have an automation built for that. One of the, and again, don't know if this is, super unique or not, but we actually took all of our EC2 servers and moved them to ECS services. Number one, way better on the compliance side, way better on the, the patching and deployment and vulnerability exposure and stuff like that. So that was, something interesting. And then I know there's some inferred, high availability, redundancy, and resilient requirements, with things, but we did obviously configure our entire, AWS architecture with multiple availability zones, auto scaling across the board. We have designs and tests for, backup and recovery to meet the RPO targets. So everything's tailored, obviously, to the government workload, requirements and stuff. Another thing, obviously a lot of companies have a version of this, right? But advanced code pipeline. So we took our code pipeline to the nth degree, I would argue, almost. Like we built automated testing and security checks at every single push, including like the testing phase, which runs some of the same tools that like a red team or something would run, but runs it automatically, against every change. So it's very interesting to see that, oh, hey, there's all these manual process and opportunities out there, for like red teaming and stuff, but we could take something automated that's done every single time. So that was something we were super excited about. So, and it uses, policies tied to the KSIs and stuff like that. So it would stop, code from going live. And then there's obviously a manual check for production as well at the end. And then, something that actually Lunarline brought up, Leslie over there, but we did build embedded guidance throughout the platform as well. So what's the best practice setup in the UX directly, right? With like, popovers and info, tips and things like that. So, it really guides users, administrators and stuff to that FedRAMP aligned CUI configuration that's like best practice. So, and I'm going to gloss over, the application design, and things like that, but we did want to kind of hit all of the points. So we built an entire compliance application for this, and underneath it, right, there's Trust Center, there's risk, there's lessons learned, there's now significant change notifications. All of this is, open API, right? So you can connect these API endpoints, and we're doing that now, right, for some of the stuff, for automated validation. And again, these are built specifically for the FedRAMP FRR. So that was like a super exciting thing of like, okay, how can we bring something simple that solves a lot of problems to industry based on the things that we built? Because I said, if we're going to build it, we're probably going to launch it for everybody. Like, there's no point in not. So, under Trust Center, you guys got a quick demo of that. This is, really cool. The public-private repos, request management, share management, API access, all that good stuff. So risk, again, this isn't just like oh, hey, fill out the risk. This is an entire workflow management surrounding with like the NIST guidance and definitions already built in. And one of the things that we do have planned for these products, specifically that we're going to do, is feed them into like the OARs, like automatically, because we'll be connecting them to the API, everything's readable, right? And then we'll be able to kind of like sum it all up into the monthly and quarterly reports. Same thing for lessons learned. You can actually give out like action items and tasks and stuff like that. There's no good, like, I don't know, NIST guidance on lessons learned. It is like you have to do lessons learned, right? So we kind of took a best approach to that of like, hey, a risk can generate a lessons learned, an incident can generate a lessons learned, things like that. And then the significant change notifications. This one's obviously a little bigger, right? Because there's like approval workflows and stuff like that. But again, we have a bunch of that across Aeroplicity already, so we leverage some of that. This follows directly the guidance in the FedRAMP's SCN process. So, one of our first stabs, just so you know, at this was GovRAMP came out with a very Excel-based, SCN process, which, to be honest with you, had some things laid out nicely and stuff, but also had some, as part of the reasoning of type, it was definitely way more convoluted than it needed to be, and especially against FedRAMP's guidance. So what we're doing now with this is we're saying, okay, cool, you guys mapped out and planned your entire significant change. Oh, you're saying this is a routine recurring change. Okay. So we built in like AI analysis to actually take into account all those things against the actual definitions, and then say, yeah, this is the reasoning, the justification that we're saying against this type of change. So I think that'll help users a bit, determine, oh, hey, this change got to transformative, but maybe we can peel it back and it could be, adaptive or something, right? And they can kind of plan their changes around what it means for the business. And then something we've had on Aeroplicity for years now is a training application, which we actually leveraged for our training requirements internally. So that's its own application, but that filters in as well to the requirements. So you have to do training against these things. How do you prove these things? So we have that all connected, right now to our automated auditor, and things like that. So it pulls the classes, it pulls the user groups that are in there, who's authorized, who's not, role based, who's in what role, and it shows all that actually to the auditing LLM. So, and I know I'm running fast here, 20 minutes, like I said, but we do want to leave this on 20x readiness, right? So, and we respect like, oh, hey, 20x is still evolving and all this stuff, but just high level, we want to be absolutely as integrated and ready to go like above the bar for the program as possible. So right now we are literally 3 shoulds short, and these are the 3. And it's not because of the difficulty of the 3, it's because how do we want to do it in our platform for the users? That's really all it is. Like, how do we, best roll this out for the user base across the board without just checking a box, was really where we kind of stopped here, because it's a UX type thing. Literally everything else, and Leslie can confirm this, she's all audited, but through optionals and Maze are literally implemented with above a 90%, automation rate. So we know we're not done. That's great. And yes, we have a high current state of readiness, but really what we wanted to kind of leave the team with is that's great. That's the bar. We really want to contribute to the 20x program, the process, the evolution of it. And I'll go on record saying we will most likely be the first company to produce a product if a new FRR comes out just on the compliance app automatically. So like here it is, it's in RFC, we'll be designing like from that point. So I think it's probably a good segue for Leslie, in the audit and letter. So yeah, we would have had a letter before the big drop. I know it didn't matter, but it still, we were really shooting for it. But she's been going through it, so I guess she could take you through kind of what the approach was, and then also, I guess, what the approach will be moving forward through the pilot.
That would be fantastic. Leslie, over to you.
All right, let me share my screen real quick. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, I just want to start with a quick introduction before jumping into the assessment approach for context. Some of you may know me, and for those that don't, my name is Leslie Hess, and I have a technical background, and I've spent the past years in cybersecurity, engineering, consulting, and assessment. In 2011, I joined Lunarline, so I've been here since the birth of FedRAMP and part of our journey as one of the first groups of 3PAOs, and now I lead that line of business. I spent several years as a Navy validator prior to my life at Lunarline, and so throughout my career, I've personally tested hundreds of systems across many different frameworks, from micro to hyperscale and all different service models. All right, jumping into our assessment methodology. So this is how we approach testing for 20x. At the time we started the process, the requirements were not yet finalized. So we knew there would be changes in the midst of our engagement, and I committed to remaining open and flexible during the entire process. So given this, I started with research and preparation, understanding the goals and objectives of 20x to frame the approach. I really wanted to assess through the lens and align myself with the requirements at the time they were published. I made sure that I was subscribed to all the threads. I get every single email. I've chimed in a couple of times, so I get every update and notification, and I actually read them. So as far as testing and analysis, I leveraged a variety of evaluation methods, so from live demonstrations, automated and manual analysis, detailed code review, provider discussions, etc. So I wanted to start with an understanding of their boundary and scope and their approach, like how are they architecting their processes, how are they meeting and planning on meeting any of the requirements. I walked through their entire AWS contents. I had access to their public trust, but they gave me access to their private trust. And so I had all the scripts, all the output, evidence files, etc. I wanted to evaluate the boundary coverage and completeness. So this was essentially going through every single process and command to make sure that all of their AWS services that they leverage as part of the boundary were included and considered in the context of the commands, so that for any given security requirement, the whole scope of their boundary was part of the consideration. I reviewed all of the outputs from every single command to verify that the command actually returned what was expected. So for example, there was one case where they had made a quick update and it was grabbing a style sheet instead of a user list. And so that was a quick fix that they did right away. I evaluated the implementation of their processes, both automated and manual. So for some of the items, along with AWS queries, there are scripts that check if a certain document exists. So I went ahead and reviewed the document to make sure it met the intent of the KSI or the requirements. So as an example, there's one that requires an approval decision. They present the document as evidence. They check to see if the document exists. But I also went and made sure that the approval decision was present in the document. And I looked at points in their process that may have manual triggers. So if the script is pulling the poem, how do we know that that poem is the most current one? And a way that they chose to check this was to check the age of the file itself. Something else that I evaluate as part of their process effectiveness is the decision logic. So, as I mentioned, they use an LLM as part of their pass-fail process determinations. So I evaluated the logic and did some modeling, looking at, does the LLM have enough information to determine the pass-fail criteria? Will it fail it if it doesn't meet it? So as an example, one of the very first ones I looked at was about training records. They were pulling in training records in a script, but I couldn't tell who was supposed to take what training from the information that was being pulled in. So my question to them was, how does the LLM know who was required to take what training and how to make that decision? So, and part of that was a conversation on how they have their training module and how it's architected as well. So I wanted to make sure that the LLM had enough information available to actually make the decisions it was being asked to make, and that the pass-fail criteria was accurate for those decisions. Throughout the process, we met frequently, around every 2 days, so that we could go through their decision processes, have discussions, review any updates that they had made. And as I mentioned, I began this process prior to all the requirements being finalized. So once they were finalized, I reevaluated everything according to the final requirements or the published ones. So that's the approach I started with, and I aligned it with the PVA. And then looking forward, one thing I wanted to say was that I'm excited to potentially be a part of the pilot program. I really want to collaborate with you guys to help improve 20x, adjust any testing or methodology, whatever's needed to get the best security outcome. We worked hand in hand with the PMO for many years. I've always tried to participate in focus groups when possible and bring thoughtful feedback. So I'm excited to help contribute to this process of shaping what the future of FedRAMP looks like. And that's it.
I gotta say, Leslie, one of the things that we found a lot of 3POs in phase one skipped out on was like basic pass-fail reviews of AI outputs. So mad props for that. Appreciate you calling that out and executing that. Quick question for you, Leslie. One of the things that we're very explicit on, it sounds like you did it, like you described this type of relationship, but the traditional Rev 5 review is like a very tightly scripted, very rigid approach, and we sort of deliberately are envisioning the 20x assessment as more of a collaborative thing, partnership, support. We've freed up a bunch of A2LA requirements that kind of bind an assessor and prevent things like consulting to allow more discussion, things like that. Tell me just a little bit about like how that's going, how you expect that to go over the next couple of months during the pilot, like this ongoing relationship, or are you just going to come back in a month and see what they've done?
No, I mean, we meet, as I mentioned, we meet every 2 days. So, that has been part of our entire process and approach. And technically I approached assessing as a collaborative process anyways, although, there's always been that fine line of consulting, but I really want to understand what they're trying to accomplish, within the framework of how they're architecting things. And so we've worked collaboratively. I'm committed to continuing that ongoing relationship. And that's just the way that I approach my business in general.
Super solid. So Jerome, Jamie, one of the things that we've sort of consistently seen is a hyper focus on machine-based information resources. And so we actually kind of explicitly reworked some of the KSIs and some of the background information in phase 2 to make it clear that a number of those apply to non-machine-based information resources, such as, is a company successfully tracking its accounts and payroll so that they can attest that they can make payroll and their product won't be shut off next week, things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach, like beyond just the cloud native resources and how you are looking at the non-machine information?
Sure.
Resources?
Honestly, just speaking to that one in general, we set up like automated reporting with QuickBooks actually that then sent out emails with like the actual reports that we define, which then get put into the trust center. So like there was already connection with that where, oh, hey, you don't have to go ask for this thing. It's like I think the security email actually gets the report. And then we're like, oh, cool. We actually want to automate it where then it pulls the report out automatically too, because we're completionists, across the board. But yeah, I mean, with the timelines that we put in the actual, in the auditor check, right? It's like, oh, hey, this specific evidence has to be updated every 30 days. So like that would be one of them. So like, you're getting across like that new report every month. Or if not, there's now a finding in the auditor.
And secondarily, we do have a direct connection called Aeroplicity_API, a specialty script that runs within our evaluation auditor, and it can just directly connect to the Aeroplicity platform. And as you might remember from the beginning of our presentation, any shortcoming within our general business operations, we just develop solutions for internally. So we've in essence sort of been developing our own ERP just by necessity of the internal resources that we've needed along the way.
True.
So eventually we'll probably be developing our own financial module, because we're not huge fans of the way everything that QuickBooks does too. But so eventually many things will be added to the Aeroplicity API as well.
Yeah, but I mean, you could look at that just from the compliance side, right? Everything from
Absolutely.
the trust to the risks to the
Training was a big one.
Training was it was cool because we already had training, right? It was beautiful.
Right.
It's like, oh, cool. We're training on our platform. We're going to connect to the API for training, and we're going to pull that in. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna, I think this is going to obviously evolve, into this one-stop thing where it's just kind of everything's pulling from Aeroplicity, automatically.
Yeah, this is all awesome. I'm excited to see all the workflows you've built out based on the processes that we've started outlining. Like, that's something that we haven't seen very much of yet, and it's encouraging to see you guys developing that way. I do have more questions about how you guys have introduced automation into your back-end environment. So you talk a lot about developing on the Aeroplicity API and that you're constantly checking things. Can you talk a little bit more about the process that you used to implement the KSIs into your back-end processes? How you're making sure that not only a document is there, but that it's actually the right things are contained in the document, and that you're validating all of the things that your processes say that you should be doing. And then on top of that, as you implemented the KSIs, were there findings that you needed to address based on your now implementation of the KSIs and introducing some of that automation that may have pointed out a blind spot that you had before?
Sure. Yeah. Let me speak to those in order. So the first point about so when we have some of those documents that we might be doing, like for example, like an evidence check on. So the first thing that it checks for is, does it exist? The second thing that it checks for is this something that it can ingest in text form in some form or fashion? If it can, then it will actually grab the text out of it and then provide that as an artifact for the LLM to take in, along with the other points that I mentioned on the slide, like the KSI description, the controls, the goals, and the auditor note. So if there is more information to be given, when it comes to LLMs, it's all about context, right? So the more information you can give it, the smarter it can be about making that decision. So absolutely, if some of that evidence that can be derived from the text I was absolutely able to pull that in that way. As for the second question, so what aspect were you looking for on that one, or Jerome, do you have a better answer?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's like some of the things that maybe we found right from running it, and then saying, okay, well, we had to change something in the architecture. I mean, we did give a prime example, in the pitch, which was the EC2 servers, right? You have like a flavor of Ubuntu right on those, and like they have a bunch of generic packages that are already included right in that image. Well, guess what? There's a bunch of vulnerabilities in most of those packages, right? And like they maybe they apply nothing to the actual security, but like Security Hub finds them. And now it's like, oh my God, you have 100 moderate findings because of this image of Ubuntu. And it's like, okay. So then the question was, okay, do we totally strip that out and build our own, or do we migrate everything to like an ECS service, which the ECS service totally way more locked down. So that was like one really like cool thing I think that we did. But yeah, I mean, as I will say that our infrastructure evaluator was super powerful, that it did, I would say, give a really great initial blanket over our infrastructure against the KSIs at the time, right? So like there was a lot of stuff. There was like, it moved us, let's say, immediately to partials across the board. And then it's like, oh, hey, well, you have this other service now. How are you going to address that? And that's where we started kind of going in one by one and really building them out. And honestly, it's evolved same day from FedRAMP's releases. Like, oh, hey, this got moved to an AFR now, so let's move all those calls over there and that was done like within 24 hours.
And then one fun thing that I did add to like the AI at some point was suggested remediations. So it had so much context of the infrastructure and the KSIs that it was able to say, perhaps you might think about increasing the security of getting up to the bar here, or even to get even farther beyond that point from there. It was kind of fun to like, okay, you have a problem, but then have it come back and say, did you think about maybe fixing it in this manner? It was actually very helpful.
Another thing we migrated away from was IAM to use like AWS orgs across the board with different I guess security profiles, right? And we did that honestly for the compliance side as well. Like, it's interesting, but AWS is actually missing something to prove that MFA is like enabled across the board. So we had to build our own approach to that. And we did that through like, what was it, a Lambda function that checks. It actually goes through like, what is it? The actual audit, the logs. To prove that it's actually there. It's just really interesting that there's a gap in AWS, like for compliance.
There are a couple gaps still in there that hopefully they'll shore up in the near term, but we made it work, right?
Yeah, we made it. I mean, yeah, we absolutely made it work across the board. So there was obviously, that. I mean, we did to be honest, when we launched Aeroplicity, the entire approach was FedRAMP in mind. So we were building out our system to the Rev 5 mentality, like with best practices already for years. So like there was a lot we already did right. But I mean, to be fair, to get into an automated state, yeah, there was a lot. I mean, we've been grinding since we heard about it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I did have one question about that, just to kind of help me understand when you're talking about your usage of LLMs in this context. It sounds. Help me understand. It sounds like you're using them for research, to understand your environment, to like make shortcuts, etc. But if I understand correctly, you're still human in the loop on things like that, and moving forward with it. So you're not having a situation where like the LLM is saying, you meet this KSI, you're good, and then you're like, okay, sweet, I'm going to take that output and put it in my trust center and move on.
No, we never connected the infrastructure evaluator to actually do the updates to the register on purpose. We used it as a suggestion tool that then we went through and said, okay, oh yeah, we are using that service. Okay, these are some good commands, or actually there's better commands that are, you know, more inclusive or something like that. So absolutely, it was more of a just a, hey, point in the right direction thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the same with
actually, I just want to say that's like super cool, because we have seen people go way over index. I'm like, the AI did everything for me, and like using it that way is a super effective use of AI.
Absolutely. And my other example at it too is like the SCN. Like, we didn't want to have you plug in to some data and then boom, it'll automatically determine the classification on that for the tool. We wanted to do it after the fact and say, as a suggestion, like, does that match what you put in there, or would you be able to shift it in one direction or another? Always an assistant to the human. So exactly.
Yeah. Well, and one more point for you, Nicole. You know, appreciate the love on the product side, but I'll just offer this. Like, any of you guys, you know, want to step through some of these things. I mean, I'll be honest, the team, we build most of our stuff from like voice of customer. I mean, that's really how the business has evolved through the years now. So like, if you're like, oh, hey, we'd love to see this, like, we'd love to hear it. Like, that's awesome. We're totally in.
Well, what you just described is a significant part of the FedRAMP assessment process that we'll definitely be going through if we work with you in this pilot. Really appreciate you all taking the time to walk through this today. I appreciate like just how excited you are about this. And Jerome, I just want you to know, this is the first time I've heard OAR used in the wild as a spoken word from the collaborative continuous monitoring. And I was just so excited to be like, yes, he said OAR instead of OR. So props for that.
You know how it is when you like work with government and stuff. You're not in it until you're speaking only in abbreviations. You know, your entire sentence, and then you know what you're talking about, right?
That's exactly right. You're implementing the OAR and the CCM as part of your video. Yeah, I got you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Thank you very much for being here.